Formula One's governing body, the FIA, is under intense scrutiny in the wake of the controversial end to the 2021 World Championship in Abu Dhabi a few weeks back. The handling of the sports rules during the safety car period that ultimately decided the championship in Max Verstappen's favour has focused deeper discontent that's already lurked beneath the surface of the sport. F1 teams and drivers were dismayed by the events at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix after a season in which have seen many complaints about the consistency of FIA stewarding. Many felt the rules were not followed correctly at Yas Marina, and now a number of insiders believe that changes need to be made at the FIA. The subject is controversial, so senior figures have not been prepared to speak on the record in the immediate aftermath on the race, but a number of teams have said that at least half the F1 teams have lost confidence in Michael Massey, and that many of the drivers have concerns as well. Massey is at the centre of the controversy because as race director he was the man who made the decisions at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and have been involved in other contentious moments throughout the past year. The key concern is whether Massey followed FIA rules in the operation of the safety car and the restarting of the race for one final lap shootout. Concern focuses on two areas, which were his decision to allow only some of the lap cars to overtake the five between Hamilton and Verstappen, not the others, for example the two between Verstappen and place Carlos Sainz. The timing at the end of the safety car period, but as you're not allowed to pull them, the lap cars are unlapped, it has to be the lap after. Both questions are those that are over discussion in the stewards to reject Mercedes' protest against Massey's decision, but overriding concerns that controversial decision, which seems to be contrary to FIA's own rule, had a direct influence on the outcome of the championship. Mercedes' appeal protest aside, it's important to point out that none of these wider issues within F1 should be seen as being about the specifics of who should and who should not be world champion. They're about fair competition. In the context of a year which consistency of the rule application has been a hot topic, Massey's operation of course in Abu Dhabi and the stewards' decision defending them raised further questions. In 2020 there was a safety car period during the Eiffel Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. Both Hamilton and Verstappen complained it had been unnecessarily long. Massey was asked about that after the race and said there's a requirement in the sporting regulations to waive all lap cars pass, so he seems to have changed his mind on the meaning of the relevant rule over last year. He followed one course of action last year in regards to lap cars in Germany last year and another in Abu Dhabi. The entire season has been littered with questions over consistency of penalty applications and decision making, much of it surrounding Verstappen. November's Brazilian Grand Prix, Verstappen was not penalised for forcing Hamilton off the track as the Briton tried to pass him. The decisions caused consternation among many drivers who felt the move should have earned him a penalty. McLaren's Lando Norris, who had been penalised in a similar situation in Austria earlier in the year, was among them, as were Sainz and his Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc. At Subsequent Racing Qatar, all drivers discussed this with Massey and the stewards to try and establish a definition for what was allowed in wheel-to-wheel racing. After a meeting, a number emerged saying the situation wasn't clear. They had been told that forcing a driver off the track was not allowed, but the matter was at the discretion of the steward panel at each race. The race after that in Saudi Arabia, Verstappen pulled an almost identical move on Hamilton and was given a 5-second time penalty. Little wonder then that he earned the final race of the season, complaining of inconsistency and saying that he was treated differently from other drivers. The only thing I ask is that it's fair for everyone. That's not the case, he said. Regardless of the debate over Verstappen's aggressive driving and whether he was right in the specific instance he was referring to, his underlying point reflected the concerns of many drivers. The problem for the FIA insiders say is that the spotlight on the Abu Dhabi GP was so bright in the context of the gripping fight between Hamilton and Verstappen that F1's reputation as a responsible and effectively governed sport is on the line, and this not only has potential ramifications for the image of the FIA but also for the bottom line of owner of Liberty Media. One figure involved in the financial side of F1 pointed out while some investors will be attracted by F1's huge global impact in the past week, others will have questions about whether a sport run in such a way is a sensible place to invest their money. It only takes a glance at the eruption over this topic on social media to see that among the questions being asked was whether decisions were made were specifically with a view to provide entertainment. This impression was hardly diminished by Christian Horner admitting that F1 bosses had discussed trying to ensure races did not end under safety car conditions because it's an anticlimax. In that sense, whether right or wrong, there is the impression of blurred lines between the legislative arm of the sport, the FIA, and the commercial F1, two bodies that are required to be independent of each other under an agreement made within the European Commission 20 years ago. This was a question raised after the controversy of the Belgian Grand Prix this year, when after hours of delay caused by bad weather, the race ran for just 2 laps behind the safety car with half points awarded. Had Abu Dhabi been the first controversial decision of Massey's tenure, it would have been unfortunate, but unlikely there to have led so many questions about his position. But in the context of so many over the last 2 years, some are privately struggling to see how Massey will survive. If he does go, some will certainly not mourn him, but others will express regret about the situation, saying Massey is trying hard to do his best in a difficult job in extremely demanding circumstances, and that is not helped by a lack of structure around him. Some say he's isolated in race control and doesn't have adequate support. He's too easily accessed by the team principals on the radio, others claim, leading to some of the conversations between him and Toto Wolff and Christian Horner in Abu Dhabi as leaders of the two title contending teams sought to advance their positions. The broadcasting of these conversations, a new phenomenon in recent times, has raised further questions to whether Massey's decisions are being unduly influenced, and teams point to other ways in which they believe the FIA's response to contentious issues could have been more satisfactory. An example of this was over flexible rear wings in the first half of the season, technical issue, and therefore not the responsibility of the FIA's head of single-seater matters, Nicholas Tombassis, not Massey. Red Bull and several other teams had designs that leaned backwards beyond a certain speed on the straights to reduce drag. They became known as limbo wings. This is clearly not allowed by a rule that forbids movable aerodynamic devices, but the wings in question passed all load tests. Eventually, the FIA introduced new stricter tests, but gave teams a number of races to allow them to modify their designs. This has been highlighted by the frustration of teams who had highlighted the problem, including Mercedes. They felt not only the action should have been taken much sooner, but there was also no need for such an extensive delay in solving the issue. It seems the FIA has realised that there were some issues it needed to address. This week, the organisation will announce the appointment of Peter Bayer, its Secretary General for Motorsport, to a newly established position as Executive Director of F1. In this, he will oversee Massey, Tombassis and Joe Bauer, among other staffs. This is in some ways reconstruction of the role of the late Charlie Whiting, the FIA's highly respected former race director, who died on the eve of the 2019 season, and who in Saudi Arabia, Horner said the sport was missing. Being race director was part of Whiting's responsibilities, and as a result, people have incorrectly assumed that Massey is his replacement. He was not. Massey was merely appointed to fill one part of Whiting's remit. The rest of Whiting's jobs, keeping the running of F1 and the FIA on an even keel, had not been replaced until now. The FIA would not comment on whether it's conducting an internal inquiry, but has since announced it has done at a World Motorsport Council meeting. But it did point out that it did not want to exist to satisfy F1 teams. Not every decision will likely displease someone. Our role is to respect the rules and to be impartial and fair and transparent, they said. On that fact, F1 would agree, but not necessarily on whether the FIA has been succeeded. All this provided the backdrop to the election on the Friday after the race and the day after the prize giving. The candidates were Englishman Graham Smoker and Mohammed bin Salaheen, who has been elected, and the FIA is responsible for much more than motorsport, as current president John Todd and Max Mosley previously has proved by expending greater energy on trying to improve road safety around the world. But F1 is the FIA's poster child, so Bin Salman will have these issues very much at the top of their array as they look to improve the FIA as an organisation. But anyway guys, that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and any thoughts, comments down below. Follow on Twitter, link description below for daily F1 news, and subscribe to our channel and subscribe right now, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.